And welcome back, college hockey fans. It's another episode of MNCAA with our NCHC crew. It's Max Veech alongside myself, Nick Maxson. Not a ton to recap just because of the Thanksgiving holiday, Max. So we'll break down the matches that did happen, preview more so the upcoming schedule, kind of do a little bit of a walk around the NCHC a little bit, and some news that does impact some players. It was the United States World Junior roster, the preliminary roster, I should say, was released, and there were 6 names on the NCHC that were selected. Doesn't mean that they make the final roster, but it means that they're essentially part of the short list that will have Team USA looking to repeat as gold medalists. I don't think they've done that in a while, Max, or if ever. As far as World Junior gold medal repeats year after year again. We'll kind of dive more into that. But Max, welcome back. I hope you had a great Thanksgiving. And from curses of once, we're finally solving some IT issues. I've had some myself throughout the season. You had a couple before recording tonight. So good to see you back, and welcome back, my friend.
It's always good to be here, regardless of how long it takes to get things going. Talking about things to be thankful for over Thanksgiving. Technology working, I guess, would be one of them, despite the fact that it's always a struggle when you have to switch over to new machines. And if anybody has been keeping up to date with the Apple updates, the new photo layout is atrocious and it's driving me crazy. It doesn't necessarily bother me as much as my wife, who is in there all the time, constantly sending stuff back and forth, which I love, for the record. But we've both been lamenting that change, among many other things going on here. But yeah, good Thanksgiving weekend. Obviously, really happy to get back up north and see a lot of the friends and family who we don't get to see a ton once the winter kind of bogs down the roads and schedules and everything else here. But good times, and hope that it was more the same for you.
It was. I got to. We smoked the turkey this year.
Ooh, yeah.
So yeah, and it turned out better than I thought it would. We did a 2-day brine in it just to kind of get it ready. And yeah, the flavors, and it was a quick cook. And quick is hindsight,
Relative.
right? Relative 6 to 8 hours. We let it rest for another hour while everything else kind of got finished up. So very, very pleased with how that turned out. More surprised that my mom was even allowing that to take place, because she is the master in control. So it was very.
I got one question for you. It's Tuesday the 3rd now that we're recording this. 1, are you still eating leftovers? 2, how are you eating those? And 3, if you're not, when did you finish those up?
So 1, no. 2,
okay.
That's NA, not applicable. And 3, I never got any.
Wow.
No. There's a reason for that. I was a sacrificial lamb. So at the end of the day, my nephew and my sister and her boyfriend took a good chunk of it, and then my sister and brother-in-law have got 3 kids, also took another majority of it, and then my parents and my other sister took another good chunk. So I'm a decent cook. I fare well without that. So I was like, you know what, you guys can have it. Although I will tell you this, I was a little disappointed I didn't get any stuffing. That's kind of my favorite little snack, reheat, and it reheats really nice, Max.
So good.
It does. And because I think you're on the same boat, and I'll ask you this, maybe this is the $1 million question. Turkey gets stale quick to the taste buds, I should say. And even when you smoke it and you give it a really nice flavor profile, it's not like reheating steak, where I could probably do that every day and not get bored with it. Turkey just doesn't do that. And I'm not sure why. Are you in the same boat as I am?
100%. 1, I'm a dark meat guy. The breast and everything, good for you if you want to eat it. I put out a couple of videos on TikTok or whatever platform it was actually on, ranking all that stuff. And I like turkey for Thanksgiving. If Thanksgiving's not here, I'm not ever going to buy a turkey and cook it. I just don't see especially the breast. Like I don't see the allure of that at all. But when it comes to reheating it, you've got like 1 or 2 times where you can kind of mix in some of the cranberry sauce or the gravy to get that flavor kind of going again. But after that, it's just one of those things where you don't want it. And you either, muscle it down through sheer willpower, you give it away, or you end up throwing it away. And, I'm not one to throw things away either. So
Right.
I didn't take any leftovers home because I didn't want to be forced into one of those two other situations either. So I'm in the same boat as you.
Wow, we agree on one thing. Holy cow.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
For us. But I will tell you this, glad that you had some good times with family and friends. It was safe. Obviously, you're back with us. It was, when you go up to the Iron Range, per se, it's always a toss up at how the roads and the weather is going to be. So glad to know that it went well and that everything was safe. And more so, you had a good time off, which is the important thing. So glad to hear that. Most of our teams had some time off this week, Max, which I think is good, for the body and the mind. There were a couple of matchups that did take place. It was Western Michigan and Michigan when Michigan shows up. So that was nice.
Right.
They did split the weekend. And we talked about this last week, Max. Western Michigan and, I feel like somebody at a national sports network must listen to the podcast because they finally are getting some attention. John Buccigross that, hey, watch out for Western Michigan. It does kind of feel like this year, Max, and granted, earlier said, and this probably isn't fair to the Broncos, but I kind of get the sense this is the most complete team they've had during the most recent run. And granted, when Pat Ferschweiler took over, they've had some good offense, they've had some good defense, but they've been missing a piece here and there. Is it the Broncos' time to kind of put the proverbial flag into the ice that they're not to be messed with, that they're a legitimate maybe title contender, or am I taking that too far or too early?
I want to say you're taking it too far too early, but if it's not this year, then I don't know when it would be. At the beginning of the year, we had 3, maybe 4 front runners, and they're still probably the front runners for the title favorites when you're talking about your Denver, your BC, your Minnesota, and then you can argue about the last one, whether it's BU or, somebody else up there. The Cornell vote is probably going to say it's them, but Western Michigan, Western Michigan is going to be somebody that nobody wants to play throughout the rest of the year, given how they've started this season. We waxed poetically, or at least I did, about the goaltenders that they've got on staff there. There were only 2 NCHC teams playing this past weekend. So, factor that into what I'm about to say. Both of those goaltenders won, NCHC Players of the Week awards. I think Cameron Rowe was actually goaltender of the week. And then Slukinski was Rookie of the Week. So maybe, there was no forward that had an outstanding weekend, and that let Slukinski slide in there. When you're splitting time, you only play one game. It's great to get one of those awards, but it's probably long overdue for both of them to see some awards again as well. So, yeah, I think that they've got just as good of a shot as anybody that's going to be in probably that 2 seed throughout the nation. And I would be shocked if they dropped. Maybe not shocked. I would be surprised if they dropped into a 3 or God forbid a 4 seed going into that national tournament. And those 4 seeds are for your conference winners and your lowly shoe-ins, if you will. And I don't think that's where they're going to be at all.
No, I really don't. And, and maybe it's more surprising the other NCHC team that was in action is kind of slid a little bit. I'm a little surprised at this, Max, only because I really thought North Dakota, especially with the job that that they did last year with 7 brand new defensemen, it worked. And granted, we know how hockey is, right? Sometimes you just get the right mix. They gel right away. It's just the right chemistry. So sometimes can you roll the dice and end up with a lucky roll? Sure. But ultimately there's coaching that's involved. There's, systems, and you got to have, the team's got to be buying what you're selling. I don't know what's going on with North Dakota, but they went winless against BEMIDJI State this past weekend. Now, I'm not going to take anything also away from BEMIDJI State, because if you remember back in the non-conference schedule with St. Cloud, I made the mention that I think the BEMIDJI State's going to be a kind of a sleeper team this year. And I still feel like that's part of the conversation, notwithstanding that North Dakota, I think, has some dying issues. And I think one of the biggest one is in between the pipes. Max, were you a bit surprised by the results this weekend, or is this more now highlighting some of the weaknesses that North Dakota may have as a team?
Yeah, it seems that unless they're playing UMD, North Dakota kind of struggles to score, and that's becoming a routine issue over the last couple of weekends here. And if you think I'm being harsh on them, you should go to the Twitter section where the
Oh,
fans
geez.
are
Pitchfork Nation, you mean? Oh, goodness.
yeah, where they are, just uh, they have plenty of things to cheer about in North Dakota, but they are finding everything that they can to complain about. And
Yep.
maybe that's a spoiled fan base, and calling them a spoiled fan base is a compliment. I want nobody to take it any other way. They
Right.
have every right to be, but this season is Jekyll and Hyde in what you're getting on the ice, and I don't know that there's any way to predict what's going to be showing up there, both from a goaltending standpoint and being able to score. I think middle of the ice and generic puck control and all these other things, they're perfectly average, if not good at some of those other things. But you're tossing a coin in the air to see what you're going to get, like I said, between the pipes or up front. And if both of those come up tails or opposite of what you were hoping for, then you're in for a rough ride. And that's not to say that Bemidji dominated them by any means. I think it was good, hard fought games both ways in both nights, but they just aren't finding a way to win those close games right now, and it's causing some is it consternation? Is that the right word for what the fan base is kind of going through there?
I think so.
Yeah.
And granted, have they had some injuries too that they've been dealing with?
Oh
Yes.
yeah. Yeah.
No, that doesn't help. But at the end of the day, when we looked at this team for the first couple of weeks of the season, granted non-conference, but you're like on paper with the talent they have at all three positions, right? This
Right.
team should easily be a top four in the NCHC. They should be competing, maybe even pushing Denver for that top spot in the conference. And for a time, they were, right?
Right.
So
Yep.
I'm not trying to take away that they had success early, but it just seems like it's just, I don't want to say collapsed, but to your point, it's not been consistent, and it's been kind of trending in the opposite direction. And again, that's surprising. And now I know, especially if you go to the interwebs, Bradbury takes a lot of heat for what's going on the ice. Now, granted, I've talked to Bradbury many times. He's a great coach. He's a great
Oh
dude.
yeah.
Um, is there maybe some of it to blame for him? Sure. Is
Yeah.
he the only reason? Absolutely not.
No, they're a sneaky young team too, similar to all the
Yes.
times that I'm going to say that about UMD. I think North Dakota is right above them in terms of zero point zero 0.01 years older in the national standings there. So a lot of learning to be done from those younger guys who are getting ice time, as you mentioned, with all the injuries that they've got going on.
100%. What I want to do real quick here, Max, is to kind of stick on this train with the NCHC. It is not too early yet, because we're talking about teams in the position that they're in, to take a look. And I don't want to interpret this too much, because again, there's so much hockey left to play. But I think this is where the time of year where coaches and teams really start to at least initially peek at the pairwise.
Oh yeah.
So I'm going to bring it up here real quick. And again, this is early. This is not like a measuring stick per se, but it just kind of shows you where teams are at. We're going to stick just with the NCHC for a second. So Western Michigan is at number 5. They're the highest NCHC team in the country. St. Cloud at number 7. So we talk about the non-conference and how much, well, it was a tough schedule, number 1, but how they came out of that. They've also done some good things in the conference play so far. So they're sitting really nice at 7, which is actually 1 ahead of Minnesota right now at 8. Denver is at 9. Then Colorado College is next at 14. You have to go to Arizona State at 19. So with their sweep on the road at Denver, my goodness, has that propped them up nearly to the top 16. And then how about this? North Dakota is at 26. They're actually 2 behind Bemidji State now at 24. Let's go down the list a little bit. Duluth is at 30.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Come on. You didn't have to say that. I know it. Come on.
Worse. Omaha at 46. And then I was going to say St. Thomas. They're not the NCHC yet, but they're also not having the season they were envisioning. They're at 51. And then who am I missing? Miami.
Ohio.
Right. They're at 58. So a bit of a tough go there for the Redhawks again. On the ice, they're better looking. Hasn't translated into wins, losses yet. I still think Noreen's the right candidate for the job. We went in depth on that a few episodes ago. I'll leave it to that. So check that out if you haven't already. But Max, what does this mean, right? Because at the end of the day, when you still have a lot of hockey to play, that doesn't mean you're out of it. I mean, Duluth, you made a push last year and nearly snuck in, right? But that also means that heading into the holiday break, and now there's still 2 weeks left before we get there of conference play, that this is where if you're struggling or if you're trying to sort of cement your play, it's got to start now. Am I wrong on that?
No, 100%. I think, like you said, this is just your first initial look. You can't even open the website until December. I think it's locked out of my browser permanently until that the first snow hits at the very earliest, but probably December. And then you start actually, looking at it in terms of a useful tool once the calendar changes. So
Correct.
not a ton of games to be played between now and then, but there are some ones that are going to be key for some of these standings here, because there is a secondary wave of some of the non-conference play that's coming up here before we kind of finish it off in a dead heat of nothing but conference play for the most part in that 2025 calendar. So I would say the top 10 teams in here, 9 of them are going to make the tournament. The ones where it's going to be a little bit maybe chaotic or more volatile, looking at it right now, is the ECAC. Dartmouth is up there at 4 right now. They've only played, looking at it, 8 games total in the year. They have obviously a late start being part of the Ivy Leagues and the programs and the schedules that they run. So that can change quite a bit. Cornell, again, down at 15, and they can jump up, kind of switch places if they really want to.
Right.
But that's one conference. And then another one in there would be your CCHA. And then Atlantic's not going to show up in there right now, but
Right.
one of them is going to make the tournament regardless. So those 2 conferences that I mentioned, there can be quite a bit of movement in there before the season's over. But I would say the ones that are in there, at least the top 10, you can expect the majority of them to be there at the end of the season.
Yes. And I will tell you this, Max, and I'll say this right away. That St. Thomas game for St. Cloud and December 20th, it's a Sunday game, is actually looking a little scary for me. And here's why. The NCC, we talked at the top of the broadcast about the World Junior preliminary roster. Let's run through those names that were added just today. So no surprises on a few of these. Zeev Buyum, again, a first-round pick at the Minnesota Wild, is on that list. He will certainly be probably a top 4 option on that roster. EJ Emery also for North Dakota. Again, another first-round pick. Part of their haul is going to be there in defense. Adam Kleber for your Bulldogs will be there.
Yep.
Is it Kleber or is it Kleber?
Kleber. Yeah, he's
Kleber.
an absolute monster out there. Yeah.
And joining him, St. Cloud defenseman Colin Rawls, 6'4" out of Shaddix. He will be there as part of the preliminary roster there. How about this? Austin Bernovic. There was no question about his shot, his offensive ability. I think even he surprised some of the scouting staff how well he transitioned to college hockey. If he's there, he's not going to be there. He's the team's leading scorer at the end of December. That scares me a little bit. And also for St. Thomas, who is, as we saw, low in the pairwise, if St. Cloud is unable to capture that win, that could impact their pairwise standings before the turn of the calendar year. Last but not least, Hampton Slukinski, again, a War Road native in goal, part of the preliminary roster. He'd likely be probably the 3rd option, if we're going to be honest, in terms of the goaltending rotation there. That'll be led by Trey Augustine. There's no question that he's likely the number 1 goaltender for USA heading into that tournament. But Max, a really good representation here for the NCHC against some guys that will likely be stalwarts in their position. Some guys may be battling for some spots. Again, World Juniors also expanded their rosters to 25. Again, you're only dressing, I believe, 20 per game, but you're carrying some extra for injuries or illness or whatever the case might be. I think that was a result of the COVID situation a couple of years ago. But at the end of the day, these are great kids. They're great hockey players, and they're getting the initial call. Happy to see them representing the conference and, of course, NCAA hockey as, again, Team USA looking to defend the gold medal up in Ottawa, Canada this year.
Yeah, I was just looking quick. You might have heard me type in there. I didn't realize that there were 5 BC kids that were on the roster, and I just had to take a no. Well, I mean, I knew there was going to be a handful. I didn't realize it would actually be a handful. Yeah, and I just had to check and see what they've got on their schedule between, while the World Juniors is going on, and somebody on their scheduling staff, whether it's the assistant coaches or somebody other than them, was looking ahead and planning for it. They don't have a game between December 9th and January 10th. So, credit to them. I have always wondered how the coaches approached that, whether you schedule a, more favorable opponent or If you are, looking to climb because you feel like you'll be middle of the pack, you want to schedule one of the quote unquote stronger opponents when they're going to be missing some of their better players. And it seems like everybody that we've been looking at so far, and maybe it is because most of them have a little bit higher reputations, either are off or have some of the lesser known opponents on their schedule right now. So credit to them for looking ahead and doing that, because I thought it was going to be an opportunity for somebody to nab some big wins.
That's when you know that before the season, well before, right, that you're going to have a good roster, and you're looking to win a national title too. I mean, no question, right? So good on them for looking ahead and planning that, because I believe, what is it, Ryan Leonard, James Haggins, Gabe Perot will be there, Aaron Minishin, I believe, in the back end. I'm trying to remember who the fifth option is. I think it's another forward, but those are some pretty darn good names. James Haggins. Stiga, you're correct. Yep, it is Stiga. So at the end of the day, James Hagen, supposedly the favorite as of right now to be the number 1 overall pick of the 2025 NHL draft. Got to see him play St. Cloud twice this year. He is good. We'll put it that way. Yeah. That's Hagen's, Leonard, and Perot line is nasty. It is nasty. So one line.
Yeah. One question I've got for you, just tying it back to the pairwise there. If you had to pick somebody, we'll just say in the top 16, that's above the cut line right now to miss the tournament, who would you pick right now? And then if you had to pick somebody outside of, we'll make it a little bit harder, outside the top 20, who would you pick to make it in? And don't say North Dakota, because we've already kind of touched on them.
Dartmouth, to me,
okay,
is a team that's number 4 in the pairwise, but no, they're not making it. Sure. And then outside of it, this may be a hot take. Augustana.
Really?
And here's why I say Augustana. The CCHA is wide open.
That's fair.
Really, really is. Before the season, I think a lot of folks had tagged St. Thomas due to their success last year. Then they got decimated by injury. They have not really picked up where they left off. And that's actually kind of sad. I actually really was looking forward to St. Thomas kind of running the show there. Augustana, granted, early addition to the CCHA because of the St. Thomas news going to the NCHC, which is going to be after next season. So in 2 years, they'll be joining to make that conference 10, which is now at an uneven 9. But BEMIDJI State, they're good, but do they have the offensive firepower that they need to overcome it? Maybe. The other thing is, I've watched Augustana play. They play a simple game. They get really good goaltending from both of their guys. They play a good structured game. They play simple, and they forecheck really, really well. So that's a team, and call this a hot take, Max, because it probably is. Watch out for the Vikings, because right now, in terms of the pairwise, they're sitting at 21. They're not that far off. And with the conference, the CCHA being sort of a no man's land in terms of nobody really taking the mantle from it, it's not out of the picture for them to not be part of that conversation. What about you?
Yeah, they've got a good head start.
Yes. What about you? I'm going to throw it back to you.
Well, if I can't say Dartmouth again, because I think the ECAC is going to be, Cornell or whoever wins that tournament, if Cornell's not already in that top 16, I would say Ohio State right now, and that's kind of a cop-out because they're right at that bubble line already anyway, but it's more so what I've just seen this past weekend, just getting swept by a team like Princeton. And then also, they had a good head start with non-conference play, and, they surprised a few people, including myself. But when you get into having to play your Minnesota, your Michigan Tech, your, the power Michigan teams, State, Michigans, it's going to, tank their stats and rankings and everything else just a little bit there, in my opinion anyway. So I would expect them to probably miss out. And we've given them credit on this show quite a bit. So my team to make it in there is going to be Bemidji State. I think it's the Beavs year. I think they've
squad.
I think it's going to be one of those things where, you see a goaltender take a team on a run, and that's Matthias Scholl, and he's going to continue to do it. He's done it against Minnesota. He's done it against North Dakota. The first time that they've beaten Bemidji, that is, beaten both of those two teams in the same calendar year, or I don't know if it's calendar year or if it's season. Regardless, impressive nonetheless. Just goes to show you the caliber of team that Bemidji can play against and win against.
It's going back to, what was that, 2018? Was that the Cole Caulfield year, right? 18, 19, somewhere
Sounds
in
right.
there? Yeah. To me, it's similar vibes, although the talent is different and they're stylistically slightly different too. They're
A little
not.
bit, yeah. They
Yeah,
score more.
they do.
Yeah.
They still defend well, but I think the big X factors, again, you mentioned Matthias Scholl.
Yeah.
So I gave you a toss up on that one, Max.
Yeah.
Here's another toss up, because as we talked about teams making or missing the cut line and the pairwise, I want to talk disappointment of the season so far. Wisconsin.
Yeah.
I mean, we talk about St. Thomas and some struggles they've had. Although I think they're more in their games, I think they're losing a lot of close ones.
Sure.
For what Wisconsin did last year under Mike Hastings for year one, it's like, okay, they're turning it around. They're playing a different style. They're bought in. What in the actual HE double hockey sticks is happening to this Badgers teams? Because this past weekend, not only did they dominate Alaska Anchorage, but they tied them on Saturday. Mind you, Anchorage is just 2-10-2 on the season, but Wisconsin in the Big Ten, I think it was expected not to take like a big jump, but to at least be kind of middle of the pack, competitive against, again, Michigan State, Minnesota. It's been, for lack of a better phrase, a train wreck for Wisconsin. And I want to ask you this, Max. I don't think Mike Hastings is in the hot seat just because it's college hockey. It's not like pros.
Right.
You really do invest multiple years. I think minimum 4, unless things are really, really bad and there's some other internal stuff that's happening that would force a coach out earlier than that. But is Wisconsin really the biggest disappointment of the season so far? And granted, we're not quite halfway there, but we're getting close. Am I correct, or is there another team that you have on your mind that might be that title?
No, it's absolutely Wisconsin. When you talk about, expectations coming into the season, they were certainly a top 10 team. I want to say they were 5 to start the year. I don't know offhand. Maybe that's just me making the situation worse because it brings me joy. Certainly a possibility. But yeah, I mean, to see where they're at right now and some of the games that they're losing or, tying versus the caliber of player that they've got on their team is kind of crazy. And it's one of those things where it's got to be just a slippery slope, just kind of drags people down. And they go into some of these situations with, looking over their shoulder, if you will, and not being able to play up to their talent because of it. And I think you would be hard pressed to find somebody that has had a bigger drop off from where people expected them to be at the end of the year versus where they are right now. Some people, people in Omaha might tell you that it's Omaha, but that's just because they went on a really nice run at the end of last year and started the season hot and just haven't been able to find their footing. I still think that they've had a little bit lower expectations versus where they wanted to be, where they would be, happy making it to the tournament, whereas Wisconsin had aspirations to make that Frozen Four and maybe go on a run a little bit further than that. And they certainly aren't looking like they're going to be able to do that right now with what we've seen through the first almost 2 months of play here.
It is, and it's perplexing, right? Because when you go up and down this roster, I mean, I've watched a lot of these guys play. Gavin Morrissey was the captain with the Austin Bruins, was really, really good for them in the null. Jack Phelan has been good in his junior career. Kyle Kukkonen, or is it Kukkonen? From Maple Grove? Kukkonen, that's right. Simon Tassi was instrumental with Minnesota State as he made the jump with the coaching staff. Joe Palachuk is a guy who can really shoot the puck. I got to do a All-American Prospects games, and he was in lineup, and my goodness, he can rip it. The only problem is that he hasn't been, and it sounds like skating has been an issue with him.
Sure.
Weston Knox, also another guy I watched very heavily with the Minot Minotauros. Good, brawny, like physical defenseman. Let's go down the list here. Adam Pietola. Again, Pietola, you're got to be somewhat good, right?
Good at hockey, yeah.
Tommy is it Scarfoni? If you have that kind of Italian last name, you got to be at least somewhat good at hockey. And then Rillian Graham. They've got a good roster, and the coaching staff, again, Hastings, they've been 1 and 2 wherever they've gone. Nick Oliver, assistant at St. Cloud. I've talked to him multiple. He took Fargo right to the USL. Was it the what's the cup again in the USHL? This is so bad. The Clark Cup, yes.
Clark, yeah.
Clark Cup.
I had Calder on the mind, and I was like, not it.
And what's interesting is when he was doing so well, and then he jumped back to an assistant role at Wisconsin, right? I think many people thought he would be tapped as a head coach for a college program since he was an assistant already at St. Cloud, got his head coaching pedigree again with the junior club, and then now just jumped on the Wisconsin bandwagon. Again, the pieces are there, and I'm trying to give Wisconsin compliments, because if you look at it on paper, it's like they should be a lot better. They really, really should. And it's
Part
just
of me wants to say they need to quit taking the private jets that the Big Ten has reserved, and they need to start grinding back on those bus trips. They need to get the boys sitting down together on some long road trips and bond a little bit. That's going to fix everything. And until you prove me otherwise, I'm going to ride that, and I'm going to sit on that take, if you will.
I don't disagree with that. I was, being on the road the last couple of years with some of the null teams. That's North Iowa. That's the Norsemen. Those are some. I mean, granted, they're long, right? Because especially on Saturday nights, you start your game at 7:30. You play till 10:30, and then if you were in either Bismarck or Minot, you are literally on the bus, and that bus is going straight back to St. Cloud. It is a haul. Oh my goodness gracious, yes.
Wisconsin is close to absolutely nobody they play. I think Minnesota is probably their closest Big Ten opponent, right?
It is, yes. So that doesn't help. But regardless, you talk team bonding. Maybe that's the issue. Who knows? Or are we already at the point where, again, coaches they're not selling the product and the team isn't buying it? Who knows? But that easily, very much agreeable between both of us. Wisconsin needs to figure it out, because it's been the biggest disappointment so far. Let's preview quick the schedule for the NCHC coming up this weekend. Again, the last couple of weekends before the calendar year. So the only non-conference action would be Colorado College. They are in Rhode Island, take on Providence. That's going to be a good matchup between those two. Again, Providence 100%. Have a pretty good start of their season. Denver will be on the road to Kalamazoo to take on the Lawson Lunatics with Western Michigan. That's going to be another great matchup there. North Dakota and Miami. Is it weird to say this, Max, but this matchup for North Dakota, and this is no disrespect to Miami, probably couldn't have come in a better time.
Yeah, it's got to be a get right series. So maybe you can call it trap series. I don't think you can with the run that North Dakota, or the lack of run that the North Dakota has been on. If they don't win both of those games, true panic is going to set in. We might have to cordon off all of North Dakota, because fans aren't secluded to just Grand Forks over there. They travel quite a bit, so
they do.
I don't expect that to happen, but if it does, I'll be on the lookout for some migration.
And how about an opportunity for Miami? I mean, blood's in the water. Right.
Yeah.
And they've been better on Fridays and Saturdays, at least, throughout the course of this season. And who knows, maybe Miami jumps on them. Maybe they get you want to wait till Saturday. I don't think you'll have to wait till then. If Miami even takes them to overtime on Friday, I think you're going to see, the nuclear clock go to midnight up there in Grand Forks. Honestly, it would cause quite a stir. But moving ahead, Omaha will be in my neck of the woods. Are taking on my Huskies, and then Duluth on the road. How about this to Tempe, your first ever visit to Mullet Arena? I would imagine that at some point, Max, that's going to have to be a road trip that somebody's going to have to make just for this, especially this time of year. Why not?
Yeah. As soon as they start playing out there in February, I'll make the trip. That's somewhere I love going, especially that time of the year. I'll drag my golf clubs with if I absolutely have to, but
so I have to ask you twice, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. It'll be more of one of those things where I beg to do it, but it's a time that UMD is, needing to get away from Amsoil. They've struggled there so far this year. I think they've only had one real road trip on the season, out to UMLowell when they were playing there, at the beginning of the season. They don't play at home again until 2025, which is kind of crazy when you look at the schedule that they've got going on.
That's nuts, yeah.
Given that they already had a week off before this. So, it's going to be one of those teams that's going to test them. It's another ranked team, which they haven't done well against so far. I really needed BEMIDJI to get ranked so I could pull out the stat that UMD has not lost to an unranked opponent yet this year, but I can't say that yet anyway. So
they're close.
I'm hoping they pick up. Yeah, I'm hoping they pick up a couple of wins. If they can get one, I will be satisfied, I guess, out there. Given how Arizona State has played so far this year with some surprising results, especially last weekend. I think that would be a win in a lot of people's eyes. But I do think that the UMD team can do it. I think that there's quite a bit of fight left in them, and some growing that I hope has happened over the longer weekend there.
And to your point, Arizona State, again, they did upset Denver on the road. They swept them. Who had that? For nobody. But they've also had some games where they should have probably won and haven't.
Yeah.
So it is kind of a coin flip, right, of which Arizona State team you're going to get. If you get the one that played in Denver, that's going to be a tough go. But if you've got it where they've played other weekends, especially at home, there's a chance. And I do think, although it's not panic mode for UMD, I don't think that this season was looked at as being in that realm, but you do, especially for this year, more trying to like feel good about the first half. You do kind of feel like there's some urgency is probably the best word for the season. I think you're right. I think if you come out with a split, I think you're at least feeling okay about it. If they get two, it might be, a shot in the arm to the squad. But either way, going to Tempe out of Duluth is going to be a nice road trip, I think, for the boys up there in the north.
Looking forward to it
of the state. Yes. And maybe one of these days we'll have to make that trip and bring the golf clubs and experience Tempe without the Coyotes. Oh, that's too early. So, oof, sorry. But with that being said, Max, that will wrap up this week's episode. Again, catch us every week as we break down everything that happens within the NCHC and college hockey as a whole. For Max Veech, I'm Nick Maxson. Thank you so much for watching and tuning in, and we'll see you back here same time next week.